afternoon. It's great to be here. And thanks again to the TaxBit team for organizing this event. And my name is Tommaso Astazi. I'm the Policy Director at Blockchain for Europe, which is a Brussels-based trade association representing the blockchain industry with European policymakers and regulators. And it's great to be here because, of course, TaxBit is a very active member of Blockchain for Europe, and we decided to join their event and support their discussions because we thought it would be a great opportunity to discuss some other angles and topics that are becoming more and more relevant. So I am very happy to be here and to be joined on stage by three magnificent speakers. I will let them introduce themselves so I don't make any mistakes with pronunciation. They can cover everything, all of the different areas that they work on, because their CV is very impressive, I can tell you. But today we're going to be talking about, again, tokenization of real-world assets, which is, I'm sure everybody is aware of how important this topic is becoming. And it's also becoming important because it's finally potentially on the agenda of the European Commission. So again, of course, as a Brussels-based association, we're obviously very focused on what happens in Brussels, what the European institutions are pushing through. And so I'm very happy to then hear the perspectives from different speakers from different types of organizations. So that will also give us an interesting, diverse perspectives. And let's have a great panel. Please, you want to introduce yourself, guys?
Sure, I guess I can start. I'm Pelle Braendgaard, the CEO, co-founder of Notabene. We were founded to really create and build a real world layer on top of crypto. And the reason crypto all of a sudden had to deal with that was because the regulators required them to all of a sudden understand what's the reality behind transactions. And that's really one of the core things that we are very passionate about. It's not just for the compliance purposes, but for us to get tokenization into the real world and get blockchain into the everyday economy. We need to build a layer where people can actually talk about transactions, talk about the people you're transacting with, what are you transacting about, invoices, etc. So that's really what we do. But primarily at the moment, we're helping companies do that to solve the licensing issues and the new requirements that came in the EU, for example, with the TFR.
Thank you. Clara?
Yeah, so thank you, Tommaso. And you certainly wouldn't have had a problem with my name. And those who already know me, you must have noticed maybe that my office went through a rebranding, renaming. Instead of the very complicated name that we had before, we're now called the Office for Digital Innovation. And it's actually the first time that I can say this officially, and I'm very happy to be here. So I am from Liechtenstein. This is really the Office for Digital Innovation is a government entity. It is subordinated to the Ministry of General Government Affairs and Finance in Liechtenstein. We've had recently elections, so our new Prime Minister is a woman, Brigitte Haas, and she will take officially office in 2 days. So we still don't know what the strategy and strategic focus with regards to digital asset innovation is, but what I can say, my office is now doing mainly three things. So one is the strategic and policy level aspects, and the legal and regulatory level. So everything relating to the issues and topics of digitalization, innovation, and emerging technologies. And as a third part, we are also having a innovation lab, some kind of R&D department. So where within the government, like in bigger corporations, we have now the budget and also the availability to pilot make some proof of concept or pilot ideas relating to emerging technologies.
All right, thank you, Clara. Last but not least, Magnus.
Thank you. My name is Magnus Jones, based in Oslo in Norway, but more out of the office rather than in. So I used to be the Nordic blockchain and innovation lead at EY, Ernst & Young, for more than 10 years, working with everything from tax and legal challenges to fraud forensic investigations, also supporting auditing team, accounting team in Solar, and also architectural from the tech side. I left EY last year, still working then in roles for Interpol as part of their Metaverse expert group. I'm also a so-called crypto expert for the OECE. and also part of the counterterrorism group of crypto for the United Nations. So I also work with everything from, call it the DeFi, DAO foundation side to governments on the total other side. Right now, I'm in the process of setting up a new company called Cointegrity. We just got our bank account approved last week, so hopefully it's up running now, even if it crossed off for dealing with cryptos. So yes, hopefully up running in a couple of weeks. And announcing the name for the first time, just like you. So two great news there today. And we will deal with all the boring stuff: compliance, consulting, tax, crypto taxes as a concerns level, and also dealing in another level that will be on the accounting side.
I mean, I told you that these three speakers had a pretty impressive CV, and I'm also very glad that we could have these new spoilers and amazing announcements that the media will be picking up on and probably will be on front pages tomorrow of all newspapers in France. That being said, sorry, I think our panel is of course the best panel of the day, but this made it even better already. All jokes aside, let's talk about tokenization of real-world assets. And maybe I'm a bit biased, as my focus is on regulation and regulatory affairs and discussions, as this is what we do in Brussels with Blockchain for Europe. But let's start from there, right? I think there is rapid innovation in tokenization, right? We see that from different parts of the industries, but this rapid innovation sometimes is running against a very much slower pace of regulatory intervention. So as we mentioned, there might be some things coming up, and we will probably talk about that in a moment. But there has been already some interesting and innovative approaches taken by some jurisdictions on this topic. So, Clara, you maybe want to tell our audience what you have done in Liechtenstein on this topic?
Certainly, just to not bore anyone who has already been to Liechtenstein and who's, wow.
Events, we have
impressive.
6, great.
Okay, I'll try to make it short. I don't know. So we really, what is important to mention from the outside on, that we're in custom union with Switzerland. And we're not an EU country, and we're not an EU member, but we are part of the European Economic Area. So we adopting legal frameworks from the EU, and they have to be adopted in the EEA agreement, and then they become nationally applicable.
We stay together. No Liechtenstein.
And but apart from that, we have already been quite early out of the gate with the first comprehensive legal and regulatory framework for crypto asset service providers, which came to in effect and application on the 1st of January 2020 already. So our regulatory authorities and the whole government, so we have already now over 5 years of practical experience with the registration and supervision of crypto asset service providers. And we didn't regulate the crypto assets as like a category or differentiate the different assets, the tokens or their utility. But we really, the key innovation of our framework is the token container model, so that we differentiate the technical level, so the token as such, from the legal level. So we really addressed or regulated with our framework the legal and actually economic nature and also the function of tokens in the digitally evolving landscape. And what that means, and also for tokenization, is so important. So the token itself is not the right. We introduced really the token as a legal object into our civil law system. And that means that the token is not the right itself or the claim, but it represents a certain right. So it can hold like a container, hence the expression token container model. It holds the right, it represents a right. And that can be everything. That can be a security commodity, that can be a claim, that can be a license, that can be, literally, and this can be access to a service. So it can be really everything. And that helps because it's a modular, innovative approach that is so technology neutral and also so adaptive that even when technology changes and the business model changes, it's already abstract enough in the essence that it can adapt to these technological changes. And this is what we wanted. We wanted something that is not out of date in a couple of months or years, given that the technology is, of course, still crashing and moving and developing. And with this differentiation of the token, of the technical level and the legal level, we can adapt to these different business models. And now with Mika coming in, everyone is saying, okay, what does that mean for our blockchain X? Well, it holds this, it stays still relevant, because while Mika basically regulates the procedures and certain requirements and certain asset classes, it's not providing, of course, the substance of the legal essence, and so the civil law for tokens, so that we know, okay, what is legally a token, how is it defined, so as a representation of a right on a represented via technology, but also how is it actually the whole ownership, when ownership, transfer, and enforceability, how is that actually legally done? And this is what we managed to do with our introducing the civil law for tokens. And then lastly, of course, it also provides a mechanism for every type of tokenized asset, and not just those covered by Mika. But not only the civil law for token is special in our TVDG, but also that we have additional roles, so addressing challenges or gaps as we see it in Mika, like NFT custody. So this is a regulated activity under our TVDG, but also we have a lending service provider, so regulating the activity of lending, so staking and lending. This is also a regulated activity, and we saw that there is like an interest in the interest of consumer protection and market stability, that this is something that we need to address. So we went ahead. So these roles are already in force since over a year, and complementing the Mika regime, which is nationally applicable since February of this year. So means that market players regulated and licensed under our regime, that they will be able to passport their services throughout the EU market.
Great. And as you can hear, a lot has been done in Liechtenstein on these topics, really forward-looking developments even before Mika was a thing, right? So that's always been often a reference made also in our conversations in Brussels, looking at the example given by certain jurisdictions like Liechtenstein on what could then be replicated at EU level. And I think Clara already mentioned a few interesting problems that we look at that we identify when we look at how do we unleash the potential of tokenization in Europe, right? And maybe, Magnus, Pelle, you have also some views on those bottlenecks and regulatory questions. I think Clara, for example, mentioned the civil law point, right? This is something that people don't really realize yet, how many changes will need to be done from a civil law perspective and national level to really unleash the power of tokenization. So I don't know, Magnus, if you wanted to jump in on this.
Absolutely. And an example that I very often use, it's actually a fairly old one. It's about the business entity register in Norway. They started out a project more than 5 years ago on tokenizing the shareholder register, the stock register. And they said the only way that we can scale our registers is by using a public blockchain. Starting the initial process 5, 6, even 7 years ago, the only choice you had there more or less was Ethereum. So that's what they chose. It was an arbitrary solution. Public available information. When I was with EY, we assisted on the GDPR work on clearance towards this one. So that was also a fun part. We had a very lively tech developer who wanted to place all these things on. And I said, well, we can place these one due to GDPR. That's one side. But another side towards this one is that this is a pilot case that has been tested. And I think if we are to scale this one in general, whatever we can tokenize, the use case is easier. Everything that can be tokenized will be tokenized, yes. But then you also need to have it in a government infrastructure. And we're still not yet there where all governments can handle all of these transactions on a tokenized way. So I think the use case from Norway is very relevant to set the precedence and the standard. And I think it's very forward-leaning towards actually saying that our registers is actually obsolete from the way how they look currently today. We need to look into different structures, not saying per se that Ethereum is the way or whatever, but they need to test on something. So that's the first step. Be realistic towards where we are. We're currently very, very, very early. And I have, from my time at EY, back starting in 2015 even, people came to us then in 2016 and talking about tokenizing A, B, C, D. And I've been dealing with everything, from real estate, from private building to public building, to hotels, to hotel rooms, to 3 farms in Africa, to swimming pools, to solar panels, to whatnot, tokenize the whole thing. And all of these projects, they've started up and call it the opposite way that maybe some of us would have thought of. They've started out by the tech business case and started building. First of all, you build IP. Then you forget about, if we are to move this IP from, for example, Norway to a more tax-preferable country, well, then you have to also pay taxes. First challenge. On the other side, it's also down to you structure the whole thing based upon, finally, our product can reach the whole world. We don't have any limits, any borders. Anyone can get it. We can swap QR codes here. I can get a wine bottle that Clara has in a basement, apparently in Hong Kong, or a storage in London or whatever. But do I know that the bottle is actually there? Well, we have to trust ironically third parties to clarify that one. That's one thing. But on the other side, what about tax issues? Because if you're looking into and saying the whole of the world is decentralized now, and we, without any KYC, I just meet Clara or Tommaso here. I don't know who they are, but I swapped the wine bottle, just to take that example. Could have been a car, could have been real estate, whatever. And there's no KYC in place. And then it also depends, is it actually the item per se itself that is tokenized, or is it a share representing the item that is tokenized? That's 2 significant different parts, and people don't take this one into concern. And if you don't take this one into concern, you will be met by the government who says, okay, so who is your shareholder here? I don't know, it's a pseudo-anonymous person. I just swapped it. It's the new technology. But then, if you cannot identify that person, you are tax liable. So then it means that the project itself has a huge, not only tentative tax exposure of a bill, but in practice also. That's why all of these projects that I mentioned has just been shut down because they started out in the wrong way and ended up at the tax legal part at the last one where it could never fly. In addition, just to finish it off, I would also say they overestimated the markets. I've been working with electric car manufacturers 3 years ago, said, we're the future of, innovation. We want to tokenize and we want to fundraise real stuff. And I was like, but there's no liquidity in this market. There's no trading platforms that is also licensed. That is a clear point here. Can they actually do trading for securities in some matter? So that's another challenge. And the last one that we clearly see is also to draw even further down in the deep basement of tax excitement, VAT and sales tax. Have anyone then thought about this? No, it's just tokenized, it's cross-border, whatever. Yeah, exactly, we have international rules covering this one. Have you thought about it? No. So that's why I've said to all my clients, since day one, set off minimum 20% of whatever you raise and get in there, because you will get the control from the tax authorities one day. Not if, but the day will come. I guarantee you. And they will come in and charge at least 20x% plus additional taxes and fee, and you have to hire in a legal monkey who will help you, not for free. So at least ensure you have 20%. Most of them don't listen at all. And just as one example, any one of you heard about the first MiCA-approved meme coin? It's called Swan, a Finnish project. It's MiCA-approved. Hey! It's not like Trump who just goes out and do it. That's not MiCA approved at all. But this is MiCA approved, meme coins approved by the governments. Ha ha ha, they say. But then suddenly it occurs, Finnish tax authority said, it's VAT on this one. Wow, this is crazy. No, it's not. I issued world's first guidance together with the Norwegian tax administration on how to tax VAT. on NFTs. And I said, they're totally right. It is actually VAT. We have made considerations surrounding this one. So these are just some examples that needs to be looked into, not only from, call it, the Norwegian point of view, but also an international point of view. Take and lift it up to, an international case. Publicly known, I assisted Adidas on their drop together with Board APL Club. International case, VAT versus sales tax in the US. Two totally different things also. Add another layer of a digital product as well, which often is into this setting of, call it, real world assets. There you have quite some interesting combinations of how you do, the transfer pricing internally at the company towards the physical elements and the digital elements. So I'm just scraping the surface of this one. More than happy for all the nerds to dig further down, but I think we'll keep it there to just, exemplify that this has great potential, but we're still not yet there. I've seen a couple of projects who has managed to set up a structure that actually works, but they are the exemption compared to all the others who just don't fly.
All right. Thank you for that, Magnus. I think you probably won a lot of points by focusing on the tax issues, considering TaxBit is running the show. But indeed, it is one of those questions that are not being looked at yet, right? And I think we realize that in our conversations as well, that the tax framework, the tax issues is not the first primary consideration made by policymakers, but also industry players. And I think it's very important to put the attention there. But I think Magnus also mentioned a couple of other interesting keywords, maybe for you, Pelle. He talked about compliance, he talked about KYC, he talked about infrastructure. So from your perspective, looking at the work that Notabene is doing in that sector, do you think that our infrastructure compliance frameworks are already allowing for tokenization to happen, or actually hindering maybe this process? And any other thoughts that you have on this point?
Excellent. So I'm actually inspired right now from all of this conversation to maybe go a slightly different direction that I had originally planned here. And I will first of all, I'll put the blame on my people. And when I say my people, I'm saying engineers. We're engineers. We love beauty, we love code, we love seeing how this fits that, this fits there. And we tend to take these engineering constructs and then we anthropomorphize, that's a difficult word for me, anthropomorphize it into something that it probably isn't. And I think a classic one is digital signatures, or signatures, as of course blockchains are built on signatures, right? Is a digital signature a signature? Or is it just literally the output of a function that has been passed to particular inputs that can be verified by running it into another function with a couple of other inputs, and that returns a true? Because that's actually what a digital signature is. But we tend to do this, and I think this is one of the issues with tokenization as well, because blockchains have created probably the most powerful settlement system, the most powerful constructs for finance we've ever seen. But it's at such a low level. It's just really, we look at ledgers, and to have something in a ledger that we can do something interesting with, we need to tokenize it. And now, cool. All of a sudden we got tokenized and we can sell meme coins, and it's a lot of fun until we're hit with a tax bill, right? On that particular front. And really, the problem is that we've been living in this blockchain sphere, and then smart contract, we can apply some meaning to it, but still it's just meaning that we can apply to it as programmers. It's not actually necessarily real world meaning. And that's really, to then tie to what we do at Notabene, what we're trying to do is actually build this real world layer on top of blockchains. And so if you take a ledger, and the ledger is, traditionally, it's, a book with a bunch of entries in, right? And that is what a ledger is on a blockchain, except it's not in a book. But you need to assign some meaning to it. And that's what accountants do. That's what business law, that's what contracts do. So normally when you do have a share register, it's also just a ledger, but there's meaning behind it. And you don't get that if you just tokenize something. So really what we're focused on is actually adding a private layer. Has to be private or GDPR, right? And many other, no one besides GDPR, businesses, they don't want to share everything that they're doing out there. Individuals don't necessarily have to share anything. So you have to build a private layer to be able to communicate the information that you need for regulators, for accountants and everyone else to actually make sense of what this is. And I think with this, it becomes a lot easier because you don't have to necessarily come up and create all the structure that you guys really did an admirable job on doing. But if there is a contract or a signed document along with this token transfer that actually says what this is, a lot of these issues kind of, I won't say they go away, but they're simpler to deal with anyway, simpler to fit in that. And that's really what we've been doing with Notabene. The crypto industry was happily working away for the last 10, 12, 13 years with a bunch of ledgers, and the meaning was there in the public markets. That's all the meaning we really cared. What's the trading volume, what's the price to the moon, all of those kind of things. That's all the meaning we ever needed in crypto. But if we actually start wanting to do real world assets, if we start wanting to do stable coins, we need more meaning, right? And FATF and so many, and a bunch of other regulators said to crypto, well, if you want to be part of the real world financial system, and we want you to, you need to figure out what's behind these transactions. And that's really what the travel rule is about and what we built over the last 5 years.
All right. Thank you.
Maybe,
Yes, I love panels when there is reactions between. Please go ahead. Yes.
To add on that or on the note of infrastructure. So we built the overarching architecture, so the legal framework to make that work. So that also allows for the courts to know that the transfer of the token also transfer the underlying right. And this is particularly, of course, interesting when the underlying right is, for example, representing a physical object. So how do we synchronize this analog with the digital world? And okay, this is now enshrined and done in our framework. However, when you think of so many other things like tokenized IP, for example, then it becomes apparent that there's still on the level of the infrastructure much work to be done. And this is what we're doing now, because if you think of patents, there's a patent registry, but if you have now a tokenized IP or a tokenized patent, how is that being, there's no register for that, right? So, for example, that makes it apparent what still needs to be done to create these registries, to create that infrastructure, to allow that, what is now theoretically and legally impossible, to also be interconnected and functioning in the real world. Or the same is with if you tokenize a house, and of course, the land registries, they're also not yet adapted to tokenized form, to tokens, right? And also not in Liechtenstein. So this is where I can say there's still a lot of work that needs to be done to allow for that to completely work. But at least we took the first step, and this I really can say no other, this is also not under the jurisdiction of the EU. So every EU member state and every jurisdiction, they have to figure out a way how they can integrate tokens and their economic and their nature and their economic reality and their function into the existing legal system, whether that is common law system or civil law or continental law system, that somehow needs to be addressed. And at least I can say we were first to do it, but it needs still a lot of work to make that a fully fledged infrastructure and framework for the digital asset space.
Yeah, I just want to jump a little back towards what you said, Pelle, on also call it the centralized part here. First of all, I'm a true believer in decentralization, and coming from EY also, I could, easily, and use zero knowledge proof and all of that on a public chain, but that's a different thing. I understand exactly what you're meaning. And my point here is also that as much as I'm a true believer in decentralization in general, I started this day by hosting a 2-hour webinar for the Finance Federation in Norway, talking to the banks and TradFi actors in this space. Seeing it was covering MiCA, but also naturally the business opportunities and everything. And what I think we will see there is more like, yeah, it might be a crypto exchange that is listing a product, whatever, but that's in a niche jurisdiction or whatever in terms of licensing and everything. I rather see from also that I carry out the annual survey in the Nordics on crypto adoption. We just recently launched this one together with Nordic Blockchain Association and a research bureau and a broker called K33. We have looked into Norway, Sweden, Denmark, Finland, and also Iceland this year. And what we saw as a finding there, and everything is public available in English if you'd like to look into it. And what we saw as a finding there is that we saw now this year that it's not only the younger generation, it's actually more of the elderly generation that is driving the growth. It is 40 plus now. It's 50, 60 plus that is actually driving it. And they are significantly increasing the exposure towards the ETPs, the ETF, the exchange traded funds, i.e. you have a stock and a share that is representing right now a crypto asset class like Bitcoin or Ether, but it can also represent other stuff. And like I always say also, and I said today in the webinar in terms of highlighting for the banking TradFi industry that might also feel a little, oh, are we missing out on something here? Are we too late? And I said, no. You have something that is lacking within this industry in general, and that is trust in terms of the brand name. That is purely lacking out there. And to take the example from the EY side also, at our Zurich office back in 2016, EY was actually the first company among the big four to accept crypto payments directly. So you just have a little QR code underneath, VT and everything in Swiss franc, pay by crypto, easy. Legally, anyone can do it today. So it's not about that. Because it was a third-party intermediary who swapped the crypto into Swiss franc and sent the Swiss franc back to EY, so EY never touched crypto, but still we were driving innovation. However, we had a really creative partner here called Marcel Sadler. He's not with EY anymore, but it's not relating to this. And we had even an ATM, a Bitcoin ATM in our reception there at the Zurich office. People were queuing up outside the office because then suddenly it was EY audited Bitcoins that they could acquire. So on this ATM in the reception, we could charge, 10% commission because we had to, cover on the costs. But on the inside, it had nothing to do with EY. It was the same ATM that was down at the train station for 3% commission. This is just a clear example when the banks and TradFi are not necessarily going to open up that many ATMs, Bitcoin ATMs in their reception. I'm not saying that. But if you revert this one to a digital product offering, it's the trust in the name that will also come and occur here again. So I believe much more in that. The irony about decentralization is in order to succeed, we need centralized third-party intermediaries to scale this one because they bring in the trust, and this is what is lacking currently. So I then see the RWA part of much more of a growth potential for these parties who's offering this one as call it a financial instrument that you are familiar with and that your accountants are familiar with, and that your whole of the ecosystem of lawyers or whatever can say, oh, stocks and shares, that's safe. Tokens, not quite sure.
Yeah, but innovation is not happening in a vacuum, right? It's not happening untethered to the other economic realities we're confronted with. So we need to have it embraced. And with MiCA and the EU moving towards harmonization and legal clarity, I believe that breeds quality and trust, and that trust in turn again is building or is helping with mass adoption. And so I believe it's not when we deal with innovation about lowering the bar, but really about raising the trust. And I think this is what we can do with when we see that we're entering in an era where blockchain is more and more providing this trust layer and probably an intelligence layer to our economy and ecosystems.
Yeah, I'd just like to agree violently with both of you that trust is really one of the core issues. And again, it's if I can also blame again a little bit on my engineering people, because us, like, we're very, very much in love with the idea that blockchain is trustless technology. And the technology itself is trustless, but the industry is also kind of expanded on that, thinking, oh, that means everything is trustless on top of blockchain. And I think it's quite clearly not so. Otherwise, we wouldn't have, like an industry from an unnamed country in Asia that's, attacking all of our perfectly beautiful trustless technology, right? So trust is really an important part. And I really actually also agree, coming from the typical beautiful pure decentralization part that at least all of us engineers, we really kind of buy into. But we need some centralized players, centralized institutions, intermediaries have an actual real job to do here. And you can say that in the past, there are many issues with all the intermediaries in the old system. And I think a lot of that's because they, in many cases, became rent seekers. It didn't actually provide any real value for it. But in crypto, I think there's a ton of additional value, but it's the new jobs to be done. But trust, it's really all about trust on that front.
Thank you all, and also for making my job so much easier by just responding to each other's. And no, but I think what we're talking about now, it was resonating a lot with actually a conversation we were having yesterday with our members and someone at the OECD, just on these topics, on crypto and what the work that they're doing, and the way that the OECD is also looking at tokenization as the next big frontier. And I think what you were saying just now really resonates with that comment, because I think we are getting to the point where we don't believe that the DeFi space will basically be the only one where it can be that tokenization will only be in the DeFi space, right? In a purely decentralized peer-to-peer framework where I want to tokenize my house and I sell my tokenized shares of my house to the person next to me, right? We understand that when we're talking about tokenization, the potential of it, it's really all about how does this new system fits within the legacy system, and how do we make that system more efficient, more trustworthy, more transparent, more global, cross-border, and all of that, right? So maybe let's talk a bit about that, and maybe let's talk a bit about session. Is tokenization of real-world assets, are we actually delivering on the promise of this digital economy, or what is still to be done? What are we seeing that is already impacting liquidity, market access? If you have any interesting use cases and examples of what things that you already see that maybe the audience doesn't know about, and then what is instead not working yet? What do we still need to achieve? We talked about a few things, but then again, going back to my Brussels lenses, what are we expecting and hoping to see coming from the policymakers? And I don't know who wants to start. Very free on any of this.
Well, I can start.
There you go.
I think tokenization and crypto, blockchain, stablecoin, there is a lot of real value in it, but it's also a mistake to say that, it's like we like to use the term crossing the chasm. Has crypto crossed the chasm yet? And yes, in some use cases. So for custody, yes. For settlement, increasingly stablecoins is becoming, that's probably the biggest use case for stablecoins so far, and it's really crossed the chasm on that particular front. Has it crossed the chasm for everyday real world payments? Everyone likes to use the example of I'm sending money home, home and all of that with crypto. And my first startup in the space was literally doing that in Kenya. But there's a lot of different things that are missing to actually get it to scale, because really we need trust on that particular, but it's starting to edge that way. So there are many different areas where we are starting to deliver value. And when I say crossing the chasm, it's like once we cross that chasm, that's when the real value is starting to get there. And yes, absolutely. And there are a lot of areas that still need a lot of work.
Thank you. Clara,
So from my side, I think not everything needs to be tokenized potentially.
it's a good starting point.
And but there is real value in certain areas, and this goes beyond like the low-hanging fruits of the whole DeFi and also decentralized autonomous organizations engaging in DeFi. But really, when you think about a fractionalization of assets to make that more liquid, more accessible, giving more choice, more opportunity to invest and for companies to crowdfund to use their IP, for example, and issuing that as tokenized, as a token and to gain capital via these mechanisms. So there is so much value in these smaller things that touch upon real economy and or also supply chain and really tackling industry coordination failures. So where many people have to work together and yet they don't trust each other naturally. And like so I see a lot of value in that, and I love to see that to become more reality in our economy, in supply chains, in governance structures, in community work, in academic work, in research, in again also like the small medium enterprises that are adopting these models to gain access to capital or liquidity and all of these things. And given that of course Europe is it's our economic backbone, are the SMEs, so this is of vital importance. Everything that helps this and this development and gives more options and choice and access is of vital importance in these geopolitical, very tense moments and times that we find ourselves in right now. But yes, also I can only second that. There's still a lot that needs to be done in terms of building the infrastructure. But I would, for our approach in Liechtenstein is that we aim for progress and not perfection, and that we rather do it in move boldly ahead instead of waiting and trying to figure out a perfect system, but to do it like that, like the engineers, like with some rapid prototyping and short sprints to improve of what we've already built.
But thank you, Clara. Magnus?
Yes, I think like we open with, like I said, there are projects that has managed to succeed on this one. But that's also the one who is dealing with trading of electricity, CO2 quotes, etc. But they are tokenizing, call it the backend infrastructure, and then can issue a token that represent, call it a dividend or something surrounding that one. So we see it from the infrastructure perspective. And, you know, you, Pelle, took a lot of criticism by yourself towards the engineers. I would rather maybe now like to give a little credit back in terms of who is actually driving the landscape, because you also mentioned stablecoins as one thing there. That's a huge thing in general. If you look into Tether, for example, as the preferred tradable stablecoin in the world, they have better earnings than BlackRock. They did $13 billion net last year. And that's with less than 200 employees. And we can always argue now, yes, I know, yeah, are they audited or not, and whatnot, and back and forth, and that's not the point. The point is that something is changing in the world today, and we've seen from also the service, it's not only CryptoPunks that is in there who is doing hedging towards, ironically, DeFi trading, and then you're going into a hyper volatile meme coin, and then you need to hedge against the horrible fiat cryptocurrency, but that's the closest thing. You go to a stable coin instead of going out, because then you don't apparently have tax issues, but in fact, you have really big tax issues. Yes, I saved some DeFi punks from going to jail, and that was a long process, so just saying it out. However, my point here is rather that when you look into the engineers now, I would like to stress one use case that I think is, call it the killer use case that also brings the trust. And that's one of the largest ERP system vendors in the world, SAP. During Davos where we were, I brought them onto my panel there. They have a digital currency hub, they call it. So if you're running SAP as an ERP system, and I'm not paid by SAP or whatever, I'm just using them as the only, call it, example out there. You can get a module implemented within 30 minutes and have access to pay your invoices by stablecoins. And then we need to look into what is actually a blockchain. Blockchain is a protocol. Now we're talking about the engineers who puts them into the protocol layer of your ERP system. So the back office people, they don't need a bloody PhD in blockchain or crypto or understand whether or not I'm touching USDC or USDT. The tokens they approved are approved by a legal team. So you don't need to think about that one. You top them up by yourself, but there's a KYC and AML functionality towards this one. So you just click like the invoice I mentioned, pay invoice directly by stablecoin. And then the accounting system also settle this one. It's not complicated. It's just another currency. It's euro, dollar, whatever. Can be Norwegian crowns, whatever. And then suddenly you get an ecosystem that is actually functioning and working, integrated into systems. Like previously, blockchain solutions has been fronted as the magic, sparkling, standalone solution in the corner. It's like addressing a bank with the old Cobalt machine. It's there. Don't touch it. Otherwise, the bank shuts down. That's sort of the myth surrounding blockchains. Now we have them integrated, and that's the way forward as I see it. So I would like to give credit to the engineer who is doing this one, that I think in general, what we will see is that we have to also, to finish this one out, change the mantra and shift it from that we are not going to run down to 7-Eleven to pay with crypto for a Coca-Cola. That's what all media is looking for. When is this happening? No, it's happening on the back-end side where consumers don't see it. The corporates might even not see it so clearly, because in Davos, it was one person out of 100 in the crowd who had heard about it. Afterwards, 99 went out to talk to this guy from SAP, because then they understand the cost saving, not from national transfers, but intercompany cross-border, and there's millions and literally billions to save on this case. So if you turn this around and say, well, the innovation is actually going to happen on the TradFi side, as we call it, or like I say, on the finance side, because finance is now suddenly using the technology like we talked about as something that we don't need to mention explicitly. It's a protocol that is integrated, it's functioning, it's there, and everything is accounted for and is legally. Then we do the progress.
If I can just add to that, first of all, SAP really need to get in touch with the Notabene sales team, because they are actually unable to verify the payer of those particular, but we're happy to help them out on that. You know,
I'm a good son, so I'll just charge a little in between. So no worries, we'll deal with it.
But an interesting just addition to that, you know, we, as part of what we're doing, we're building a new public, open, decentralized alternative to Swift, the messaging network. And this is something you haven't been able to do on blockchains before, and it's called TAP, the Transaction Authorization Protocol. And we're trying to bring all of these things in, like purpose code, account, you know, all of the, like, a lot of different contexts that you actually need, not just for regulatory compliance purposes, but to be able to tie into the back-end systems. But the interesting thing is I'm doing a lot of time talking with banks and to the stablecoin teams in there, and it's very interesting. 5 years ago, everyone was in the innovation department, right? Now, they're all building actual real products, and I pitch them this and say, we should be able to write a ISO 20022 layer for you so you can integrate it into your backends. And I've heard at least 50% of cases, they're like, no, please don't. We're already switching to much better settlement system with stablecoins. Can we just go with the new, as long as it solves those backend integration things? But that's actually a really important aspect of it. It's not just making the regulators happy, not just making the tax accountant happy. You need to make the backend systems happy.
And I think it's a great example of, call it what you said, on the private side that is combined with the decentralized side, because what we're actually talking about is the integration. It costs literally zero. It costs you 3 hours of IT tech development to integrate, call it, access to our open protocol, like the stablecoin infrastructure. So that's also a very important element to the whole thing. We're way past, call it, the bank consortium setups of, with all respect, R3 or Clara, whatever, or JPM coin or whatever, that sort of was going to take over the world from the banking side. This is the preferred one. No, then we just need to look into geopolitics. And I don't think we need to raise that question specifically today to understand that we might not have a joint thing, that whether or not this will be preferred euro or dollar or whatever. I think that's a wormhole that we don't need to dig into, but rather understand that as long as there's liquidity, it's legal and it's compliant, and someone will use it. And someone is currently using it right now, and that's the finance institutions on the back end side, without anyone in the public, of the media or whatever, noticing it. While we who sits hands-on with this one, we clearly see the volumes that runs through them.
Thank you. And unfortunately, we cannot get into the geopolitics now. I think it would be an amazing discussion, opening a Pandora's box. And I'm sure our audience will probably have a lot of questions, but I'm also more sure that they do want a drink. So with that, thank you so much to our panel.